The year was 1559, a blazing July noon filled with the clashing of steel and the roar of the crowd. King Henry II of France rode out for a jousting tournament, one that would end in tragedy. On that day, just as on every other throughout his reign, he openly displayed not only the symbols of his kingdom, but also the emblems of his unwavering devotion to one single woman. On his ceremonial garments, on the shields, and even on the decorations of the celebration, one bold and provocative emblem stood out: 3 interlocking crescents. It was the official insignia of Diane de Poitiers, her personal mark, which the king raised higher than all the royal regalia. The initials D and H, Diane and Henry, were woven together in an unbreakable monogram, adorning castle walls, royal gates, and even palace domes. All of France knew, in this union, the royal title belonged to him, but the power over his heart and his realm belonged to her. Diane de Poitiers held a position unlike any other in French history. Her officially recognized influence was so immense that she became the 3rd most powerful person in the kingdom, not merely standing beside the monarch, but effectively ruling with him. Even during the grand coronation of Henry's lawful wife, Catherine de' Medici, those intertwined initials, D and H, shone shamelessly across the festive decorations. But what truly astonishes us, what makes future generations look at Diane through the same dazzled eyes as Henry himself, is her age. On that fateful day, when the king rode out for the last time wearing her colors, Diane had just celebrated her 60th birthday. 60 years old. In an era when most people barely lived past 40, she remained not only powerful, but was described by the poet Brantôme as the goddess of love, the enchantress of history. How can one explain such overwhelming devotion? Unlike many royal favorites, Diane didn't hide her position. She used it to establish nearly absolute influence. In his passionate letters, Henry didn't simply confess affection. He worshipped her as a higher force, as the one who shaped his destiny. In 1547, he wrote, "I am yours, I am yours, I am yours, and you are my fate. My sovereign princess, my love for you is a sacred mass, unbroken by cold, nor rain, nor heat, nor the endless chain of years, nor even the shadow of eternity." Such words, written by a monarch to his beloved, sound less like a love note and more like an oath of worship, a vow to a divine ruler. Perhaps the secret lay in her astonishing beauty, which contemporaries compared to a statue carved from marble. But even marble cracks with time.
Those who lived in her age were far from unanimous. Some, like Brantôme, claimed that even at 70, Diane remained as fresh and captivating as she had been at 30. Others, more cynical and cruel, mocked her as she neared 50, taunting her wrinkles, her pale skin, her artificial teeth, her silver hair. They sneered at the goddess of beauty, calling her an old mushroom. As always, the truth lies somewhere between flattery and insult. To some, she was a pure genius of beauty. To others, a witch who had cast a spell with an enchanted ring, as whispers at court claimed. But one fact remained: she was a phenomenon. Widowhood, which for most women marked the end of their public life, became her launching pad. Her noble lineage, older and prouder than many of the courtiers, including even the queen, served as her invisible shield. The Poitiers name, far more ancient than that of the Valois dynasty, to which King Henry belonged, reminded her constantly of her superiority and sense of destiny. That confidence, born of ancient roots and mixed with an unknown secret to maintaining her youth and unshakable willpower, allowed her not only to become the king's favorite, but also to take control of the affairs of the entire kingdom. To understand how Diane could be seen as both a goddess and an old relic by the same courtiers, one must look into her past, a past defined not only by beauty but by power written into her bloodline. Her influence over the king, expressed in those passionate verses about fate and a sacred mass, could not have been based on charm alone. It was the force of her heritage and her personal status. Diane de Poitiers was born on September 3, 1499, into one of the oldest and most respected families of the Dauphiné. Her ancestor, Guillaume de Poitiers, was said to be the last Duke of Aquitaine. That lineage, which she proudly remembered all her life, made her family name older and more revered than even the royal house of Valois. Her life began with a mystical prophecy that ended with the words, "Rejoice, for she shall rule over all." It was not mere flattery, but perhaps a recognition of the unwavering will that would define her destiny. At 15, she was married to Louis de Brezé, the Seneschal of Normandy, 40 years her senior. This union, with the grandson of King Charles VII through his mother's line, instantly placed the young Diane among the highest ranks of power. When her husband passed away in 1531, Diane, then 31, made a decision that would define her legacy. She commissioned a magnificent tomb in Rouen and wore mourning attire for the rest of her life. The black and white of her garments became her personal emblem, a combination that not only mourned her husband, but also established her signature style, instantly adopted by the entire court. The stark contrast of black and white symbolized both her untouchable purity and her shadowed power. But beyond her lineage and widowhood was the physical mystery.
She maintained a form that seemed to defy time itself. Her secret to remarkable youth, as noted by contemporaries, was an extremely disciplined lifestyle. Her daily ritual was unique. She rose early, bathed in cold water, and rode on horseback for 2 hours. After a short rest and a light meal, she devoted time to reading. Diane avoided all cosmetics and never drank wine. This discipline, bordering on asceticism, may have been what gave her that marble-like freshness that drove the king to obsession. It was this combination of aristocratic pride, political reason, and physical discipline that enabled her to wield an influence no other royal favorite ever matched in the history of France. Her rule extended not only through emotion, but through intellect, and above all, through an unshakable control over the state itself. The black and white that defined her style symbolized more than eternal mourning for her first husband. It represented her role as the court's shadow sovereign, both pure and omnipotent. Diane de Poitiers masterfully used that role to build her legend. She was not merely a royal mistress, she became a muse and a trendsetter of the French Renaissance. Her intuition for beauty and talent allowed her to turn her position into an instrument of soft power. Every great artist and architect knew that Diane's favor meant not only royal approval, but immortality in stone and on canvas. She was the visionary and overseer of architectural projects that laid the foundations for the famed Fontainebleau School. Her name is forever linked with the Château de Chenonceau, gifted to her by the king, where she designed the iconic bridges and galleries that cross the River Cher.
It was Diane, not the Queen, who managed the royal library and supported the finest scholars and writers of her time. She consciously cultivated the image of the Roman goddess of the hunt, Diana, commissioning statues and paintings of herself as youthful, strong, and ethereal. This was more than vanity. It was a strategic act of self-mythologizing, a timeless marketing move that cemented her as the eternal embodiment of power and allure. And it worked flawlessly. Yet while she built in art, she dominated in politics. Her greatest rivalry was with Catherine of de' Medici, the Queen herself. Catherine, an Italian aristocrat, struggled for years to produce an heir, a fact that gave Diane even more confidence in her own untouchable position. But Diane didn't just compete with Catherine, she actively invaded her royal duties. It was the favorite, not the Queen, who greeted foreign ambassadors, read their reports, dictated responses, and influenced every appointment in the state. Perhaps the boldest move in this rivalry was Diane's control over the upbringing of the royal children, including the future king himself. She managed their schedules, mentors, and even personal attendance. It was a public humiliation for Catherine, stripping her of her role both as mother and monarch.
Diane was also a brilliant financier and businesswoman. Her vast personal wealth was not mere extravagance, it grew under her skilled management of estates, titles, and royal revenues granted by the king. Her financial acumen allowed her to operate independently from the royal treasury, a rare and powerful privilege that only reinforced her political autonomy. She was not just a lover, she was a partner, both financially and politically, making her almost untouchable in the whirlpool of court intrigues. This daily balance between her roles as cultural patron, de facto finance minister, and shadow queen built around Diane an aura of near absolute power, one that even the highest nobles dared not challenge. She was, quite literally, the living embodiment of the prophecy that had once foretold her reign over all. This remarkable blend of personal discipline, ancient aristocratic confidence, and flawless political instinct, the same mix we just talked about, led Diane de Poitiers to absolute unprecedented power over France. Historians note that no woman in a similar position had ever achieved such total influence over a monarch, nor managed to convince foreign rulers of her authority as she did. Under King Henry II, Diane de Poitiers had, in practice, taken control of nearly all key matters in the kingdom. Her political portfolio was vast and public. Ambassadors from across Europe openly addressed their correspondence to her, bypassing traditional diplomatic channels. She even exchanged letters with the Pope himself. The king never made a decision or signed a decree without first seeking her counsel. Henry II didn't just love her, he trusted her judgment completely when it came to running the country. Her power wasn't hidden in the shadows, it was recognized, rewarded, and financed. In 1548, Henry II granted her the noble title of Countess of Valentinois, and just 5 years later she became Countess of Étampes. The peak of royal generosity came with a gift that became a symbol of her influence, one of France's most stunning castles, Chenonceau, stretching gracefully across the River Cher. But behind all this brilliance and splendor stood the rightful queen, Catherine de' Medici, forced to endure this open, daily humiliation. Her feelings were bitter and unmistakable. She once confessed, "I welcomed Madame de Poitiers kindly because the king required it, yet I always made her feel that I did so to my deepest regret, for never has a wife who loves her husband been fond of the one who replaced her, however difficult such words may be for women of our rank to utter."
This restrained yet boiling resentment, born of public humiliation, created unbearable tension within the palace, a tension that, as we'll soon see, was about to erupt. The breaking point was near, and it would bring Diane de Poitiers' absolute rule to an abrupt and irreversible end.
The tension that had been building for years suddenly and dramatically reached its climax on that fateful July day in 1559. King Henry II entered a tournament to celebrate a peace treaty, ironically wearing his mistress's colors for the last time. A lance from Count Montgomery struck him down, and the tragic fall of the monarch instantly reshuffled every power dynamic in France. The reign of Diane de Poitiers ended not through political intrigue or rebellion, but because of one tragic accident. As soon as power passed to the new king, Catherine de' Medici, who had silently endured public disgrace for years, finally saw her moment for revenge. And her revenge was cold, swift, and deeply symbolic. The Queen Mother shed no tears. Instead, she acted with the calculated resolve she had harbored for 2 decades. On her command, Diane de Poitiers was immediately exiled. Catherine's first and most humiliating demand was that Diane return every jewel, every precious gift Henry had ever given her, including the ultimate emblem of her power, the Château de Chenonceau. In exchange, she received a modest estate, the Château d'Anay. Overnight, those who had once kissed her hands and sought her favor disappeared. Yet Diane de Poitiers revealed an inner strength few had ever noticed. She withdrew to her lands, spending the remaining years of her long life in relative seclusion. Even far from court, however, she didn't abandon her sense of duty. In her final years, she founded several hospitals, ending her journey not in luxury and intrigue, but in quiet acts of compassion. She passed away at the age of 67. Her departure, 8 years after the king's tragic fall, was as peaceful as her life in retirement had been. In the chapel of her Château d'Anay, a marble statue was erected in her honor, the same image of timeless beauty her admirers once celebrated, and the one she had spent her life trying to embody. For centuries, this marble statue, just like the legends surrounding Diane de Poitiers, remained a symbol of an eternal mystery. How did she, despite her strict discipline, manage to preserve such long-lasting, almost supernatural freshness? The supposed secret lay in her iron self-control. Daily cold baths, long hours of horseback riding, total abstinence from wine and cosmetics, an explanation that seemed logical, yet failed to fully account for that marble whiteness and smoothness of her skin that made her so distinctive. Historians accepted it at face value, but the real truth began to unfold only 5 centuries later. The historical drama gave way to a scientific investigation in 2009 when Diane de Poitiers' remains were exhumed for modern analysis. It was a moment that promised to either confirm or debunk centuries of speculation about her beauty and her mysterious lifestyle. A team of researchers, including pathologist Philippe Charlier and toxicologist Joël Poupon, began examining the hair and bones of the legendary royal favorite. What they discovered became a true scientific sensation, a shocking revelation that finally explained the enigma of her beauty. Diane's tissues contained an astonishingly high level of gold, 250 times more than normal. That finding immediately unlocked the secret behind her eternal youth and that marble complexion.
In her era, alchemists, often consulted by nobles and royals, believed gold wasn't just a precious metal, but a true elixir of life, a source of vitality, strength, and above all, beauty. Scientists concluded that Diane had been regularly consuming a special potion prepared by alchemists, one that contained microscopic particles of gold. But the so-called golden elixir, which she believed granted her timeless beauty, turned out to be a slow-acting poison. In such concentrations, gold inevitably leads to severe intoxication. It accumulates in body tissues, and one of its visible effects is exactly that striking, unnatural paleness of the skin. Suddenly, the old accounts of her contemporaries took on a disturbing new meaning. Diane had always been known for her fair complexion, but in the final months of her life, her face reportedly turned ghostly white, taking on a chalky, almost lifeless tone. Scientists concluded that the very thing which had made her legendary for decades, her dazzling beauty, was in fact the result of chronic intoxication. Her marble freshness had come not only from discipline and abstinence, but from the invisible destructive power of the precious metal itself. In the end, Diane de Poitiers truly was a genius of beauty, but the price she paid for the legend of her ageless allure was immeasurable. Whether knowingly or not, she had been drinking her own slow-working poison in her quest to remain a goddess. History lives when it's told. Subscribe. What comes next, you've never heard before.